The views expressed by the hosts are entirely their own and in no way represent the thoughts or intentions of the original author.
This podcast is a discussion, shared to spark thought and conversation on the characters and themes of this novel.
The interpretations presented in this podcast are just a few of many possibilities. Listeners are encouraged to read along and share their own analysis of the text.
Though the hosts speak mostly within the constraints of this book, series spoilers may be discussed with or without warning.
Explicit language, as well as themes of sex, violence, abuse, depression, self-harm, and death will recur throughout this podcast. Listener discretion is advised.
If you are enjoying the podcast, check out our Patreon for more exclusive content. You can find us at patreon.com/BookTok for BookTok. Welcome to Book Talk for Book Talk with Jack and Amy, a literary podcast where we deep dive into the writings of your favorite novels. This winter, we are hosting a book club while we prepare our 10-part literary analysis of Sarah J. Maas's Throne of Glass.
This is Jack.
And I'm Amy.
And each week we'll discuss one book from our winter book club roster. By using our literary background, we'll provide our flash analysis of each book as we discuss listener thoughts.
This week, we're discussing One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig.
As a warning, I am at my mom's. We're recording this the Monday before Thanksgiving. And so I'm a little echoey. And then if you're watching this, I'm so sorry. I don't know what lighting situation is happening, but I don't have a filter on. I just have a lot of weird light on me.
And it is, as Jack says, Monday morning. So there's construction happening across the street. So we'll see what happens.
This is going to be such a special episode. It always is, but extra.
I have been dying to have this conversation with you.
No, me too. This one hurt in a good way because I was like, I want to talk to you.
I finished this so long ago and I started listening to the second one because I was like, I can't hold back. That's why it took me so long to finish Stardust Thief.
You're busy listening to another one.
I only got halfway through it, so
the truth will out.
It will. But I will not discuss book 2 spoilers because I haven't finished book 2, so there's no point in me discussing it.
So as we like to do our warnings, we both listened to it. We did not read it. One of us followed the assignment and only listened to part 1, mainly because I didn't have enough time to get into book 2. But I'm happy you did because I was like, I feel like so many books. I'm like, I just want to do the next one.
Yeah.
And yeah. Okay. So because you started this torture.
10 words.
10 words. Oh no. Why? Okay. We're describing it, right? That's like the rules that we've set upon ourselves.
Yes.
Okay.
Or like our reaction or our feelings or whatever.
Yeah. An extremely original fantasy book with unique magic and love.
Nice.
Thank you.
Nice. Mine's going to be very similar, I think.
Okay. I have my hands up ready for you.
An enthralling world and magic with characters I need one more word.
Really love?
I was going to say will devour.
Okay, yeah.
I wanted to say want to devour, but I will say will and devour.
Again, we go full caveman with this. Like, watch food, watch devour. Yeah. When we did our original post announcing what books we're covering, Guild, one of the most popular ones that people were like, can't wait to see what you have to say. This one was by far the number one of One Dark Window. Can't wait to see what you have to say. Please, can't wait for One Dark Window. Loved One Dark Window. One Dark Window. And it didn't disappoint.
It didn't. I've got goosebumps. I had no idea what we were going to get into with this. I was worried that because it was so popular that we would be disappointed. But let me tell you.
Oh, tell me.
Raven is my new forever book boyfriend.
No, because we were going to fight for him?
No! I don't like that many men. Give him to me.
He is my book boyfriend. Okay, so I guess we're going to start at the top then. Okay, or do we should discuss other things before we get straight into Raven.
I think we have to talk first about the world and why we're
magic.
The magic and why we're so engrossed in it.
Yeah. It's great. It's unique. I feel like this reminds me a lot of Once Upon a Broken Heart, and I've been confusing the two of them because of the once of it all. One and once, and I was like, oh my goodness. But you have a magic system and there's a lot of cards based in the magic system, different from Once Upon a Broken Heart, but it kind of reminded me of like this idea of magic is defined by a deck of cards, and you have extreme set like rules with this. Like this is high fantasy where it's like you have what can people do with these cards? Are there limitations with it? Where does the power come from? Can the power end? And those are all the things that like when you're developing a world and you have a magic system that you should ask. Like, you know, sorry SJM, but we're going to rag on it a little bit when you think of things like ACOTAR. And this is fine too, but like where's does the magic come from is such a good question. And here we have with the cards, not just where the magic comes from of what people can wield, but also where the magic literally comes from. Where do these cards come from?
And on top of all of that, what are the consequences of using magic?
Yeah.
I really, really have a hard time accepting worlds where there are no consequences to magic because you're using forces beyond human nature. So it makes sense that there would be a price for that.
Yeah.
So, you know, things like ACOTAR, things like Harry Potter, you're like, okay, like you enjoy it, but something that is like there are consequences, you have to really judge what you're willing to sacrifice in order to use this magic is so captivating.
Yeah.
Because you know every decision is going to come back to bite them in the ass.
It also does a lot for an author to have to write around those boundaries too. Like I'm sure there were so many times that she would think like, damn it, I need them to get to point C, but it's going to be hard because the magic won't allow this, or there are rules to that. And what, not just that though, like you also have every consequence and every time we saw magic being used, magic being a form of punishment or whatever it may be, it really felt like it was a part of the plot. And not necessarily like, here's just a random example of magic. Like it was used, I don't want to say sparingly because they used it a fair amount of times.
Intentionally.
It was all very intentional, but that makes sense because they're humans. They don't have magical abilities naturally. So if you're going to tap into this, quite literally, they tap, then you have to know when you're doing it.
But it's not like we understand that from page one, right? There's a slow trickle of information about these cards that I really appreciate. I think that Gillig did pretty masterfully, if you think about it, because there's a mention of Providence cards, and you're like, what the fuck is what the fuck is that? And we understand pretty early the nightmare card. And then we are one by one kind of introduced to the powers of each card. Even though they might be described here and there, we actually get to see them in action, which I really appreciate. They're not this like, except for maybe the twin alders, they're not this far away figment that have no bearing on the actual plot. Every card serves a purpose in the plot.
Yeah. I mean, although I will say it took me a little bit to be like, oh, wait. Black Horse is the card, because I was first a little longer than I thought. I was like, where are these black horses coming from? What makes them different than other horses? Because there's a certain amount of horses cards that each one has. Like it tells you early on how many, I mean, like you said, not page one, but it tells you how many cards and horse and like, you know, each one has. I hope at the book, because I will 100% buy this book because obsessed with it. I hope there's like a thing at the beginning that has like a number count for like how much each of these are.
There is a description of the number count at one point.
Yeah, but the audiobook, you think I'm going to remember that?
No,
I need
no.
visual.
I like to think of it as tarot cards meets the 12 Days of Christmas, because it counts down from 12.
Was it?
Yeah, it counts
Was
down.
it really? Like you had 12
dark horses.
Dark horses.
And then it counts down. I think that was what it was. And like there's 8 maiden cards, there's 2 nightmares, there's 4 scythes.
1 twin alder.
And then 1 twin alders. I will say the one thing I know about the second book, and this is not a spoiler, is that it does go into the making of the cards. So you get more backstory on the cards in the second book.
It's so refreshing when you go into a new magic system. And I think that that's what I've been feeling the most out of this book club, is that every time we've read something that is just unique, right? Like Spark of the Everflame or Guild, like every time there's something that's just kind of more unique, it makes me hungry for it. whenever there's something that's beyond like I wave my hand and this thing happens and like random shadow magic, it does make me excited and really hungry for it. And I think that that is probably what's been a big positive. Actually, I can tell you that's a big positive because we asked for listener comments. Some people said that loved how unique the magic system was and the spooky vibes were good. I think that the magic system was really unique. Complex magic system. Love the magic system. Unique compared. Unique magic. Okay, so
a lot.
I mean, everyone keeps using the word unique. I guess that's the main word. We've used it, so.
Yeah, I mean, we're accustomed to wands. We're accustomed to waving a hand. We're accustomed to shadows. Like, you know, shadow daddies are a common theme. I wouldn't call Raven a shadow daddy, but he has shadow daddy vibes. But it doesn't look like Reese or Rune or, you know, some of the other ones that we're accustomed to. So, I mean, huge points for Gillig. She created this fantastic world, and I could not stop listening to it. I listened to this book so fast. I would listen to it as I was laying in bed trying to fall asleep, being like, nope, fuck sleep. I'm going to keep listening.
One dark window, more like two dark eyes, because I'm not getting any sleep tonight. Yeah. I wanted to look up the fan art. I wanted to look everything up, but I was like too worried of spoiling it. And this is like one of those books where I can't wait to buy it and read it because I know it's going to be a different experience reading the book. Oh my God. Like I was texting my cousin. I'm like, I can't wait for book club to be done so I can go back and listen. And I felt that way about Spark of the Everflame. So I am screwed. That's what we've got here.
Pro tip. I put the Barnes & Noble exclusive editions on my Christmas list for my family. So
holy shit. Hold on. Wait, what do they look like?
They have spray painted pages.
What do the edges look like?
It's like kind of like a gothic Victorian wallpaper, but it's got windows on it.
One dark window.
Barnes & Noble.
Let's see. Now, you can't start something, Amy, and not expect me to want the exact same thing that you want. Oh, that's so pretty. Okay, well, I would ask my mom for these, but my mom did tell me she doesn't want to buy me books. She would like to buy me something, quote, fun.
Oh, burn.
I was like, cool, shove me into a locker and call me a nerd or something.
Yeah. She's such a boy.
Yeah, it was like dweeb. Like, I was like, okay, like, audiobooks? No, I want something that I enjoy giving you. So on brand for her.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the other positive things that I think lends into this conversation about the magic and everything and the vibes there is everyone loved Nightmare.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amy had like a very visceral reaction to that.
What I think is so lovable. So he's taking over her body. That is her degeneration. Her being Elspeth.
Yeah.
So we should inherently not be okay with this, right? He's kind of a parasite. And he wants to do things against her will. And she does consent to him helping her, which is essentially consenting to her degeneration. I can't say anything else because I've started reading the second book.
Well, you know what? This is your fault. You did this to us.
It is.
Okay, well, now I have to say my opinion, and you can't have feelings on it.
Yeah. I do have something I can say that is book one.
Okay, go
only.
ahead.
No. You go first.
So what I like about him is that there's a complex relationship there. From book one standard, he doesn't feel guilty, at least what it seems like. He doesn't like it necessarily, but he also like wants it, you know, like he wants to have a body again. He wants to be in charge and, you know, be able to exact, I'm guessing, revenge or something. And that is his goal, right? Now, at the same time, I felt like there were very clear moments where he cared about Elspeth. Like every time he called her dear one or dearest one, something where I was like, no, he likes her. And there was moments that like, you know, he would come in and just be like really panicky and worried for her. And it sounded like he was truly worried for her. And even when Raven at one point came into her head and she's trying to kick him out, trying to kick Raven out of Elspeth's head, the Nightmare comes in and he screams, she said get out. And I was like, oh, he defended her.
Yeah. I'm glad you reminded me that he does say dear one in the first book. because there is a shift, right? He's condescending to her for
Yeah.
part of the book, but you see this gradual progression to him, especially as she's degenerating. He cares.
Yeah.
Right? She's not just a host. She's someone he's watched over for
Mm-hmm.
11 years. So there is this connection. There is this bond. What I think really sets the tone for me is that first scene when Elspeth is a child being pushed out the window.
Yeah.
And she passes out, but he essentially moves her body for her so that she is not captured by the physician. That really sets the tone for you, right?
Yeah.
On one hand, it could be self-preservation,
or he
or
like
not.
wants to take care of this little kid.
Or this little kid is going to be killed. So
Yeah.
like he has enough compassion to save her from that situation.
We also, okay, like this is gonna be hard because I'm sure you're kind of like blending a little bit of end of book one with book two, but at the end of book one we get a glimpse of the first time that he meets her, Elspeth. The nightmare meets Elspeth, and it's from Nightmare's perspective of like, you know, being trapped for a long time, and then a little girl kind of coming up, be like, who are you? What's your name? And you know, there's like as much as like his snarky commentary throughout, like, oh, like torture, like I don't want to be here and everything. Like that is the first connection, human connection that he's had. And the things that I can see, and I'm going to say this because I don't want to see your facial reactions, but like it seems like he cares about kids deeply based off of the memories that we've gotten. And I'm sure there was that innate connection. And like, I'm sure, and how many times, like, maybe he thinks he raised her too, you know, like,
Yeah.
being like, hey, how about we don't put our finger in the electric socket? I know they don't have electric sockets, but you know, those like dumb things. You're like,
Yeah.
let's not do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is more explained in book two. But it definitely is there in book one. Like he has, for someone dubbed a nightmare, for something dubbed a nightmare, you can tell like there's something inherent about his soul that is drawn to Elspeth.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I think he was like perfect level of comedic relief in a book that's like pretty serious, because I also think he gives voice to some of the thoughts that she doesn't want to give voice to. You know, like some of the not wanting to tolerate things, like just really moments and conversations dragging on. Like maybe she doesn't want to think too poorly of her half sisters or something, even though like it's not like she's trying for them, but he really gave voice to things. And I also like that it was explained that he kind of comes and goes in her mind.
Yeah.
Like he's not constantly there. So there are moments of reprieve. And then like for me, I'd be busy being like, are you there when I got my period for the first time? Like, are you watching while I'm in the shower? You know, I would be so in my mind of like, I heard you fart, you know, like I don't need like a nightmare card in my head calling me out for the dumb shit I do.
Yes. Yes. And doesn't he and Raven have that conversation? No. That's in book two.
You ruined us. No.
I didn't spoil anything. I didn't spoil the extent of the conversation. I want to go back to something one of the comments said about the spooky vibes from the beginning. I don't know if this was your case, but it does feel very gothic.
Yeah.
Very contained and trapped. You know, and part of that's the mist, part of that's the wood. But you feel that kind of like constantly being watched and trapped the entire time.
Yeah. And that's one of the other pros a lot of listeners called out, is the fact that it does feel so gothic. And it is a sense of situation mixed with environment, mixed with description. You know, like you said, like I think you called it out, everything. You know, it's the mist, it's the, you know, feeling trapped. Well, why is it trapped? Because people are watching and lurking all around, you know, like you can't really fully believe everyone that you're around. You also have like falling apart castles, and it is a very spooky vibe. It made me think of this, where this is Rachel's first book. And have you looked into her?
Is this her debut book?
This is her debut book. And this is what makes me feel good about what we do. I'll tell you why, because I'm going to read her bio on Goodreads, because we started this podcast so that we could be better writers, So Rachel was born and raised in California Coast. She's a writer with a BA in literary theory and criticism from UC Davis. Our girl knows, and it shows. It really shows. I think that there's a lot, that literary theory, that criticism, that level of understanding the layers. It makes me excited to go back and read it because I'm sure there's going to be more layers to it that I didn't absorb the first time just like snorting this book. I feel like that gothic vibe was done not just intentionally for a mood setter, but done intentionally for, I don't know, maybe even just like plot and driving the narrative along and themes that we haven't even begin to explore.
I definitely felt like there was some Edgar Allan Poe inspiration when I was reading this, not only for the vibes, but also Raven, his name, the Raven from Evermore. Like, it feels like in the best way possible, Gillig took Evermore.
I think you're spot on. There's like the cards are in the floor, the body is underneath, like, you know, Evermore. Yeah, I think that's great. That's a good call. It's a good call. I didn't put Edgar Allan Poe, but you're right.
I got it.
You got it, kid.
What should we discuss next? There's so much to discuss.
Let me read a couple of the negatives, I suppose. I don't want to be like, I disagree, but, you know, someone says that it's only a duology. That's funny. Okay.
Well, yeah, I get that. I mean, I would love for this to go on for years and years and years.
So I think this is a fair one to discuss. I feel like it was slow and lacked depth. Felt like it could have been a lot more. I feel like, and I was actually thinking of this as the book was coming to an end, because at one point at the very end, when they were doing that truth or truth game, truth or die, I looked at my phone and I was like, we only have an hour and 20 minutes left of this book. So this is what you would almost consider the climax, or at least like leading up to it. And, you know, everything is going to be happening, wrapping up quickly. And in that moment, I kind of sat there and I thought, okay, what happened? You know, like what was really going on? Like, is there's not much in the definition of crazy action, crazy intense things. There's not much happening. However, I do feel opposite of them.
This listener.
The listener, of their thoughts. Like, I don't think it lacked depth. And I feel like I can understand the vibes that it was slow, but for me, it wasn't slow.
So just to play devil's advocate, what is your definition of depth and how it applies to this novel?
What strikes me as depth and what strikes me as like things that resonated, I guess, would be the concept of I don't want to say letting yourself go, but the concept of, I'm trying to like figure out how to say this because it feels like it's in my brain and I don't know how to get it out or what I'm truly thinking. So I'm going to ramble a little bit and hope that this makes sense. So when we did Spark of the Everflame, I felt like it was very clearly mental health coded, right? Like I felt like there was a clear cut, like this is a book on narrative about mental health. There was a moment where I thought of that too here. And I kind of walked away being like, no, I don't feel that way. Like it wasn't as hard of a like messaging. I felt like this book had a lot to do with, I don't want to say like, you know, finding the strength within yourself. Cause I don't think that does it justice. Like I think that's just not, I'm not accurately saying that. I think what makes this book have depth for me is the fact that I'm struggling so hard, you know, to figure out like what I'm trying to encompass, because I guess it would be like, there's just so many emotions happening. And I had many emotions listening to it beyond, this is so good, I want to read more. I felt like it invoked a lot more emotions and I need to sit there and kind of think about which emotions and why did it invoke it. But so when I think of, and that's a personal thing to each reader. So that's, you know, one by one. Okay, you put me on the spot. Now you.
I think the underlying question for me, at least from the protagonist's point of view, was, is it sufficient to base love for or to be loved by someone purely on the commonality of being tortured souls? Like having the same problems. Like, is it enough that Raven falls in love with Elspeth only because she is like him? I mean, and we don't know that that's the only reason. But that's a question Elspeth struggles with, right?
Yeah.
And for Elm, who has grown up with Raven, who loves Raven like a brother, it's not enough.
Yeah.
It's in fact a hindrance. And so the many different forms of love and what that looks like across all these characters is
Yeah.
a huge theme. And what does it mean to be family? What does it mean to have things in common? What does it mean to lie? You know, I think it plays with really fundamental concepts of human nature and how we form relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that with how Elspeth's father treats her, how her stepmother treats her,
Yeah.
and yet how the Hughes take her in as if she's one of them.
I want to play off of what you're saying because you're finally giving words to like, yes. I think that also allows Elspeth to choose the kind of love she wants.
Mm-hmm.
I think it gives her courage to do that. And she's weeding out, right? Like the love that her aunt, uncle, cousin, half sister, stepmom, dad gives her. And then finally here she's finding and discovering a love that she truly wants, at the same time battling with the nightmare, because you can't say that there is not love between the two.
Right.
And she wants the nightmare out, but who is she without the nightmare?
Right.
You know, and can you love yourself and not love the nightmare within?
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, there you go. There's your theme.
And it doesn't have to be like in our face about it. I think as we can see, it's very compelling even without those themes knocking us over the head.
Mm-hmm.
I think that these themes are explored purely by the plot, not just by sitting down and having conversation. And that, to me, makes a masterful story, that the plot in and of itself is driving the fundamental questions of what does it mean to be loved.
And I think that maybe that's where earlier we were saying that like the fact that it's Gothic style lends to the plot rather than just it being a setting. I pulled up like, you know, Gothic fiction just so that we're all aligned. It has the elements of fear, horror, death, and gloom, as well as the romantic elements and stuff. And, you know, a lot of dark and decaying buildings and stuff. So if you look at that as almost the emotional, mental state of a lot of the people there, because everyone here lives in fear and you have to make sacrifices of who you love. That's where I think that subtlety, because I think Gothic literature is subtle within itself, because you don't need to show too much to say decaying building and stuff, right? Like I think that it's a quiet vibe. And I think that that's why it goes so well with this book and this plot, because of what you're saying, that everything isn't super overt. It's not in your face. The conversations aren't loud. It wouldn't feel right for it to be loud because the setting, the world feels so quiet.
Right. Yes, completely. You know, I think it's perfectly encapsulated just in the scene at the market when the parents and the boy who's infected come up and they send the parents into the mist.
Yeah.
Do you choose to love someone quietly despite the fear and the threat that is towards you and them, or do you give them up? Do you sacrifice them for your own good?
Yeah.
And we can see that play out in so many different ways with all the characters here.
I realized how, I don't want to say jaded, I mean, asshole I am, but where earlier we have Emery, who's the other prince brother, and then Elm is the other prince. Emery is the brother, is Raven's brother. Early on, when we discovered that part of the reason, or mainly the main reason that they being Raven, his parents and everything, are looking for a cure is to save Emery. And I remember thinking like, oh, that's not a good enough reason. What does that say about the reader, about me? And I don't want to say just me, you know, like everyone, where does it have to be this absolute, we have to save the entire world, which is what, you know, they're looking for. But what's their main drive? It's to save Emery and in turn Raven too, because, you know, everyone who's been infected. But I kept thinking like, okay, now there's going to be a bigger reason. And even though Raven also being infected is a reason, I didn't feel like that's the big reason. It still felt truly like we love this brother, cousin, son. We need to save him. And even the drive is quiet. It's subdued.
Yeah. And that's, I think, actually really beautiful, that it doesn't have to be like this grand plan to save all of Blunder, which we have to talk about in a moment. We have to talk about Blunder and the Book of Alder, or whatever it is, the old book. But look simply at the act of love saying, you know what, we're going to commit treason. We're going to do this thing that is mythical. It might not actually happen, but we're going to give it our all because we just love this person so much.
Yeah.
And are you as the reader capable of that kind of love as well.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'll try for you. I mean, I guess I'll commit treason.
I think it helps that Emery is younger, right? I think.
Yeah, there's like a protectiveness about it, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
He's an innocent in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Okay, so you wanted to talk about Blunder. I love that the name Blunder is the name.
Well, and at some point, I think, because there's so many different passages from the book, right?
Yeah.
These little rhymes to learn about the cards, to learn about the history of Blunder. Blunder was called Blunder because of the Shepherd King's blunder. Like,
it can be overt, guys. Like, and that's making me kind of feel like I need to like look back into my own, my own style of writing where it doesn't have to be Sarah J. Maas level of like, there's this lore, Scottish lore, and then, in there is a character, and that one character in this like super weird name, and I'm going to turn it around and rewrite the letter. And if you look at it in the reflection, it actually means this. He fucked up. It's a blunder.
I think because it's a Gothic setting, it helps, right? It feels very fairy tale. It feels very allegorical. And the whole world and this plot and these characters are their own nursery rhyme for us. Yeah. They are teaching us about the concept of love.
Yep.
As spooky as, some of those rhymes are, some of those excerpts are, I loved every moment of it because it taught us about the world, but it kind of foreshadows what's going to come next or something important about, how the card is used in this setting. I can't say enough good things.
I know. Okay. I feel like I'm going to read more bad things.
Okay.
so that we can give it more time. Because otherwise, like, you and I are just going to be like, okay, like, this is awesome. We know what's hilarious is that a fair amount of people really hated that they used trees instead of like, oh my God, or like, damn, trees are the curse.
I loved that. I loved it.
Because that within itself is a clue.
Yeah, it is. I mean, why do we say God? Like, we're taking our Lord's name in vain. We're taking on the name of our higher power. And it's almost a call for your higher power to curse whatever the situation is. Like, if they believe in the spirit of the forest, if all of their surnames are trees, they worship trees, it makes sense that they would use the word trees.
I love it.
I think it's simple but ingenious. It's just part of the world building factor.
Trees. I'm going through the comments. Someone wrote nightmare as a pro, but they put like hot panting emojis next to it. I'm covering your face. Don't look at me. Okay, I'm covering your face. Okay. I will go into the next category and I'm going to read two things. So some people said that they liked Elspeth and the fact that she is a realistic heroine where she has no particular great powers to her and she just be struggling along, versus other comments saying she feels underdeveloped and kind of useless. So here's something about her where you have two camps, right? But we all agree Elspeth is a normal girl. She doesn't have much magic to her. She doesn't have much power to her. And she is just kind of at the whim of other people.
Yeah.
I love that. And then other people don't like that. And I can understand why that might be frustrating to read a character that is at the whim of other people. Her strength is based off of a man.
Right. It makes sense for her situation. I think in a different setting, if she was not infected and did not have the nightmare in her head, if she was a different character in a different book, it would be frustrating that she's not at least physically capable of taking care of herself, or she maybe has more wits about her. She's none of those things because she's never had the opportunity to develop, right? She's been sent to a country home. She lives with simple people, like they themselves are simple as well. She's lived in fear her entire life. The only thing she's good at is hiding, because that's what it takes to survive.
You said something you kind of grazed over it. I was like, you're freaking right. Her own wittiness, you could argue, isn't even hers. It's like, when I say wittiness, I don't mean her being funny. I mean like her wits, like her knowing, okay, it's time to run. Her knowing like, maybe I should tell them or not tell them truth or not. Like, that's the nightmare who's telling her all of these things. And when you think about it, she's been assisted her entire life and coddled even by the voice in her head.
She has not been able to develop since she was 9 years old.
Yeah.
That was the last time she was an independent being. And even
Yep.
then, she wasn't independent. She was a child.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that she is unable to be the heroine we might be accustomed to in a fantasy novel. To a point you made earlier, everything about her relies on a man inside her head. She does not know what it means to be a woman on her own. She relies
Yep.
on the nightmare to get her out of dangerous situations that might have, resulted in worse circumstances for another woman.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we also have to keep that in mind as we're reading her, that she has a setback, and that setback is, or, you could say it's a step forward, however you want to describe it, but she is still 9 years old at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. And like that's also why I think her decision to move forward with her romance with Raven is so important, because it's her choosing, right? Like she's
Right.
choosing this next level. She's choosing life as a woman and everything like that, right? I also feel like it makes her relationship with Ione really important, because this is an element that has nothing to do with the nightmare card. Now you can say the nightmare card has like warned her to be wary of the maiden card, and she's learned the consequences of that. But there's other elements to it, right? There's that level of like, you don't want to say it, but there's a level of jealousy of like, wait, now she's beautiful, but at the same time you're worried about her, and you don't want that. So none of the words were said. You never had Elspeth sitting there being like, "Oh, I'm so jealous of her." And I don't even think her thoughts were outright jealous, but there were tones, right? Like, oh,
Right.
so now she's beautiful and now she has all these things. Now, would Elspeth want that life? No. You can be jealous but not want that same thing, right?
Right.
And then it grows into worry. And then it grows into, wait, but she's looking out for me. And is my cousin even there anymore? And that is a growth in that female growth, that female story that is separate from the king. And normally I would not be a fan of like, great, so you're telling me that the only thing that makes her strong is a man and all that stuff, like things that I would normally be like miffed about. I think in this case, it enhances the parts of her that is inherently just her, and sometimes the female experience.
In those moments, oftentimes the nightmare is a detriment
Yeah.
to the relationship with Ione, right? The nightmare doesn't like Ione, thinks that she's just kind of a
Boring.
bumbling fool and boring. So we start to see the complexities that have been injected into their relationship, which used to be so innocent. And that's forced growth. And Elspeth is growing despite the nightmare and just because of the situation that these two women have been put in. And I think that's actually really beautiful. I can't wait for you to read the second book. Granted, I'm only halfway through it, but, I think there's some real complexity between Ione and Elspeth that is so inherently female and so inherently about growing up and how your relationships with women change as you get older. That I think was really, really well done.
And you even get some subtext with Ione too, where, like during that game of Truth or Truth, we have this moment where Elspeth says, do you really want this? Is this something that you wanted? And Ione says, I'm going to butcher this, but something along the lines of power, right? Like sometimes you really want power. You need to fight for that power and everything. And I think that gives you clues to who she might have been mentally, because she is her father's daughter.
Yep.
And we find out that we find out that the uncle is like the biggest piece of shit that there ever is.
Yep.
And we find out like maybe that influence might have like this understanding, maybe not even influence, we'll call it understanding. Elspeth has always had her rich father to take care of her at the end of the day. Her aunt and uncle could throw her off in the streets and her dad will take care of her. He has already proven to be there for her financially at the very least, right? Ione doesn't have that with her family. It will fall upon her. She must have had in the back of her head this idea of what's responsibility is and what she can do. And I think you even get a hint of that when they first have an argument early on, right? In the beginning of the book. I do appreciate seeing that there too.
Yeah. It's true to its Gothic origin, this book, but also true to the female experience. This is a man's world, and no one's going to look out for me but myself. So
man's world. Sorry.
I need to take advantage of whatever situations are thrown at me that I can take advantage of.
Yeah. So I actually kind of want to like go into, I'm dictating this conversation. I am sorry. So Ione and her uncle and everything, where Ione is not her equal in that stance, right?
By her, you mean Elspeth.
Elspeth, yeah. So Ione is not Elspeth's equal in socioeconomic background, right? It's interesting then that the family that she does connect to is someone who is her equal, if not above. And that is Raven's family. That's Elm. And I think that speaks to it too.
Yeah. Well, let's also talk about the fact that Raven is literally her father's successor.
Talk about daddy issues.
Yeah. As captain of the Destriers. So this is where I think goes back to my conversation from earlier. In a lot of ways, Raven and Elspeth are reenacting their traumas. But in doing so, they find solace in each other. They don't find peace.
What is her trauma that he's reenacting?
He represents everything her father was.
But what does she represent for him? Because we can see that, right?
She is like his brother Emery,
that he can save,
infected, and someone he can save, or he feels obligated to save.
We're aligned, and probably easier to save because she doesn't feel as far gone as his brother. I love the fact that he's her father's replacement. And the moment when they shake hands with each other, I was like, oh, this is the best. In your face daddy trauma issues.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah. I will say, so the first time we encounter Raven, we don't know it's Raven. It's on the highway. He's a highwayman. The second the description was Elspeth could smell his clothes and cedar scent, I was like, oh, this is the love interest.
If it's cedar, if it's clothes, it's love.
Well, it's the first description of somebody's scent.
Smell, yeah.
And then the second it comes up again with Raven, he smells like cloves in the outside. I'm like, oh, I know who this is.
Okay, before we get into Raven, because Raven deserves his own encore, I do want to call out the Swiss Family Robinson of it all, of the family. Like, they're just so... Who's that part? Is it the Partridge Family? That was also the Highwaymen family. It felt like a 70s TV show. Like, you have the Brady Bunch, you had Partridge Family. Like, it's just like, hi, we're this family, and we're gonna be highwaymen to steal for our son / cousin / brother. I just thought that was really funny, cute. I know it's not meant to be funny or cute, but I thought it was funny and cute.
I think it's funny and cute.
Yeah. And Elm, I am slow clap, love Elm.
I think he's a very complex character.
Yeah.
I think he's harder to like when you're strictly in Elspeth's point of view.
I don't know. I liked him.
You had him you can have Elm. I'll take Raven.
Not at all. We're duking this out.
Anyway, I think he's an interesting character. I think there's a lot to learn about him still, you learn about him, or that I've learned about him so far in the second book. His caginess makes sense.
Yeah.
It's aggravating because I'm like, why are you keeping the two of them apart? You know, and there are times where you're like, is he going to turn on them? Is he ultimately going to try and win his father, the king's favor if things go sideways? Even knowing Elspeth's truth, that there's, you know, the soul of the Shepherd King inside of her head.
Yeah, yeah.
At the end of the day, he's still loyal to Raven and Raven's family. I think he is another great character that is worthy of examination.
Yeah. I think he's a good example of having such a good developed side character who have their own stories. Like, we don't have to be in his head to get it. We can be in Elspeth's head. He's antagonistic to her. I think she's just more of like, I don't know what I'm doing. I respect that. As a writer, I respect that a lot, that we get that there's trauma. We get why he's doing this. We get why he feels the need to fight back. We get why he can't be home. You know, like, there's a lot of things that just make sense with that. I have another thought that popped up. Sorry, I'm like, I love so much of it. Like, Elspeth, she cried at the times I'd cry. Like, she just was kind of like whimpering when the times I'd whimper.
Yeah, she's allowed to. It's all overwhelming.
Okay, so let me read you one more negative comment.
Okay.
This one's pretty simple. Raven, you. Okay, let me build off of that. The romance felt half-baked, half-developed. The romance was lacking. Several people did not like Raven You. Don't know how I'm supposed to believe this romance. And where's the smut? All right, that's a fair one. So let's talk about the romance before we get into... I mean, romance we'll branch into Raven. But we already talked about the romance, so I don't know.
Well, you know, I think, again, the romance is complicated in that they both represent something that should be traumatic for them or is speaking to their issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
Elspeth's daddy issues, Raven's savior complex. That's not a great starting point for any relationship. But when you think about it, the majority of their time together is spent on the common goal of finding these cards and trying to reverse I was going to call it blight, but the curse on Blunder. And it's not like a lot of time passes in this book.
I think what's interesting about their relationship is that there's not much push-pull. Of I want you, I don't want you. There's tension, there's tension from the get-go. The entire time I was like, please don't be the bad guy. Please don't be working with Hawk. Oh, thank God you're real. Like you're the real, like you're actually the love interest. So I was thrilled about that. Very relieved. What was an interesting build-up for their love, because if this is truly a duology, we don't have 7, 6, 3, or even 3 books to like get us far until they're in love. They're not in love. I felt like what I liked about them as a couple is that it felt very direct. There are emotions there. Now, are they both kind of like, oh, I don't like, I'm just pretending, wink. I'm also pretending, weak. But even then that it didn't feel real, because it's like, why do you always answer a question with a question? Or do you really like, it was like they were both skirting around it. And because we, the reader, knew that there was an interest there.
Yeah.
I felt like it was a more direct romance. And then we got to the romance. It was streamlined, which I'm okay with because the story had a lot of other things happening.
So I have thoughts and theories about this. I think the most obvious thing about these two is that there's a magnetism between the two of them. And we don't quite understand why. I have a theory about that magnetism.
I don't want to hear your theories. Your theories have been tainted with part of book 2.
That's fair. I'm not going to say that book 2 confirms it. I don't think it does, but I think there's a connection that is unexplained between the two of them.
I will agree.
I also think that the pacing of the romance is necessary to drive the plot of book 2. Because why should Raven care so much if she degenerates?
Yeah.
If not for his savior complex and how happy he was after having sex with her, which was freaking adorable.
Was like, and okay, so I'm jumping in. So Raven, what I love about him is like he cares, he's honorable, but he's got just enough of a douchebag in him that I love. Like the fact that like, because it wasn't like he came out to breakfast and was like, yeah, I had sex. Like,
yeah, it was good.
It was good. I had a good time. Like, it was, but at the same time, he's also going to like just really like her and just kind of show that off. Like he has no problem showing off his love for her. And, whether it is savior complex and, it can start one way and grow. It can grow into more.
Yeah, I'm not saying it can't. Yeah. I think we also have to remember this is a 26 and 20-year-old. I think I
forgot he's 26, yeah.
I think the love is going to be simple. They have both been guarded for so long.
Yeah.
Any vulnerability that they're willing to share is automatically going to create a connection because they're only vulnerable with those that they truly love.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, they're not even vulnerable with themselves sometimes.
Right. So for them to be able to be vulnerable, to speak their truth to each other, no wonder they're going to fall in love with this person. They've learned no better.
Yeah.
Right? They don't have enough life experience to say that that's not love.
Yeah. What's his degeneration again?
He
won't be able to use any of the cards.
Yeah, over the years.
Over the years, yeah. Oh no. I mean, that's the perfect degeneration though. But I also love that plot line is what made him stronger and faster and work harder and everything. And yeah, I think he's just such a good combination of what you think is he is honorable. He wants to take care of his brother. He's a protector. Like he's the right combination of protector and douchebaggery, He'll fuck up Hawk's hand because he hurt Elspeth. Hoth. Sorry, thank you. Hoth. He'll hurt Hoth's hand because Hoth hurt Elspeth. You know what I mean? I love that scene so much because her and Elm are just like casually having a conversation while he's in the background just kicking Hoth's ass.
Yeah, like just another day.
Yeah, he was like, "Is he normally like this?" No, he's just he really likes you. Oh wow, just and then stomps on his hand.
I did love that scene.
Mother's favorite scene is when Hoth is, "Do you really care for my cousin? What is it about him that you like so much? He's tall I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, I did too.
She had some spice to her. Like she's not this like loud, spunky, in your face character, but Elspeth had some really good moments.
She did. Like you could tell when that nightmare has rubbed off on her.
Yeah. So tell me why Raven sparks, like, because you don't like men often, hence your female fiance. What is it about Raven that perked your interests?
First of all, he has a beak-like nose, and I love beak-like noses. Don't ask me why, I just do. He had very Kylo Ren vibes, to be honest. You know, the black hair, the large nose, he's tall. It's my Severus Snape leaning appreciation of men. But also, you've already spoken to it. I love the protector, but I'll fuck you up, and I don't care what the consequences are.
Yeah.
Who can say no? But I think he's so earnest.
Yeah.
You know, when Raven and Elspeth make out in the chamber, and then Elspeth runs away. Later on, he's like, I was worried that I'd done something wrong. Like, he spent time thinking about it instead of being like, you're such a bitch, how dare you, right? He didn't get egotistical about it. He's like, oh my gosh, is she okay? Which I appreciate.
You can tell the like brains are more developed on that side there. You know, it definitely is more of a, he does think about it. He does, and he doesn't take it personally either. You know, it's not like well, I'm going to be annoyed too. It's, I'm going to care for her. And the fact that he doesn't waver from her when he finds out about the nightmare, he's scared and he's worried for her, but there's never a moment of, you know, he's not going to not touch her or he's not going to be there for her. I love all these little moments where he claims her and everything. And, you know, all of those sweet moments. I will say, technically this book is YA. I was looking at it and I was thinking,
I mean, they're old for a YA book, but
they're not YA. Stop making things that are YA. I mean, and then because I feel bad saying I want more spice. That is my only question to this world. My one question, my one understanding, and my lack thereof. What are the rules and propriety to this world? Because I thought I understood pretty quickly. You have the concept of courting, right? You have dowries. You have, you know, all these things that give me very, you know, old-timey vibes.
Very Regency era.
Very Regency, if not earlier, you know, vibes.
Yeah.
Then wouldn't having sex be a bigger deal? Is that an immediate, okay, you're automatically engaged? Then he kissed her pretty openly several times. They were hugging and everything. And then you also have her 13-year-old sisters that were drinking wine at one point. And I was even confused with that, thinking like, okay, where are these girls? Who are these? Oh shit, you're the children.
Yeah.
Who am I? I was also had wine when I was that age too. So,
but they're like openly drunk.
Yeah, I was not openly drunk. I was very controlled, monitored. So that's the only question, was the rules of society. Yeah. Because I feel like everything about this entire romance, this entire book, I will argue, although maybe subtle, is pretty developed and pretty well thought out. Their sex scene, personally, I wanted to explore more, not necessarily in a more smutty way, although we'll always say yes to that. I wanted to explore it more because I think that would have been a better way for me to understand this world. What does her having sex for the first time mean? Because we have her talking about giving Alex a chaste kiss a few summers before. And everyone was teasing her and everything. But, you know, that was a few kisses. And from what I can gather, that's the extent of her knowledge, was that one experience where she kissed a boy. So then she goes from kissing one boy to kissing Raven in the tower to having sex on the floor. And I need to know, does that progression, is that an extreme statement? Is that her declaring, I am a woman, I'm not some old man in my head, you know? Or is that just kind of something that you'd almost expect with this world?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I do think the sisters being drunk at the market and on their birthday is pretty revealing if they're only 13 or 14 years old. I also had the same questions the day after they have sex, and Raven's pretty open about how good he's feeling about it, because that's very outing for her. Yeah. Not necessarily for him, right? As a male. Yeah. So the fact that he was so open about it without fear of consequences was curious. I wouldn't expect that in this world. I would have expected more propriety, especially if, I forget what his mother's name is, but Mrs. Yu, Lady Yu, is like, well, I'll be your chaperone. That's how we'll get away with you coming to stay with us.
Exactly. Yeah.
But she never chaperones. So That is a question. I don't know if it's because this is an incestuous town that's been stuck like this for 500 years, and so their ideas of
everyone
propriety.
can have sex, and that's fine, and that's okay with everyone. Like,
Yeah.
I think I'm willing to overlook that if I knew what having sex meant for her.
Yeah,
because I never got this moment where, because 20 is still young.
Yeah.
But it's also old enough to know what it means. I think that's why it's such a unique perspective, because she's old enough to know what this step means for her. This isn't just I like a boy, I'm going to do this. There is significance there. And I feel like that was a lost opportunity to maybe get that layer developed from her. And that's when I feel like sex is important in storytelling, because it reveals a lot about our heroines, our heroes, and everything, and everyone around.
I agree. I think that there could have been a little bit more intention with the scene and consequence with the scene that I don't think there was. But I also don't know to the extent that the way it plays out is because of this magnetism and the underlying reason, if it exists, for the magnetism.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess
Either
I have
way,
to finish the second book.
I know. I can't wait to do this. I'm listening to Stardust Thief, and then we have Book of Azrael, and then your girl's going in.
Yeah.
And then we have Throne of Glass.
Oh, yeah.
That one. Forgot. But it's easier because I can listen to things outside. But honestly, this was one of my top favorite books of this year.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think this is my number one book. I still think about it, even though I'm listening to other books.
I am going to desperately try to get her on the podcast.
Oh, I would love that.
Same. If you're listening.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Book Talk for Book Talk with Jack and Amy. We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform. Next week, we will be discussing The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah.
We would love to hear your thoughts based on today's conversation. If you'd like to submit your take on any of the books we plan to discuss later this winter, please be sure to follow us on Instagram, where we ask for listener submissions.
If you're enjoying the podcast, please visit our website, booktalkforbooktalk.com, to view our latest merch and learn about supporting the show through Patreon or Venmo. You can follow us on TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube at the handle BookTok for Book Talk. Please, please, please share, tag us in your stories or your posts. We love to see them, and it's the best way to help the podcast grow. Bye.
Yeah. Okay. I was like, wait, what? So, like, line me up. I'm here. I'm there. We're good. I had Spanish lesson before here. My brain is translating back now. I'll find any excuse to why my brain is the way it is.